존 테일러 스탠포드대 교수가 한국경제TV와의 단독 인터뷰에서 현재 인플레이션이 일시적이지 않다며 미국이 연내 테이퍼링과 금리 인상을 동시에 시작할 필요가 있다고 강조했습니다. 테일러 교수는 각국 중앙은행들이 통화정책 운영의 지침으로 삼는 테일러 준칙의 창시자입니다. 조연 기자가 만나봤습니다.
Professor Taylor, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you very much.
네, 현재 미국의 물가에 대해서 파월 연준 의장이 일시적인 인플레이션이다 이렇게 판단을 했습니다. 교수님께서는 어떻게 좀 판단을 하고 계신가요?
Well, I'm concerned that inflation is not so temporary. We've had a pickup recently, but even before that, we've had indicators. Interest rates were quite low relative to where we think they would be based on past experience, and money growth is very strong. So I think it's probably not temporary, be my guess, and so some action of some kind is needed.
테일러 룰의 근거에서 봤을 때 지금 물가와 미국의 경제 성장률을 보면 미국의 적정 금리는 어느 정도라고 생각하시나요?
First of all, you always have to go in slowly. You don't want to frighten the markets, scare the markets. But if you just plug in the inflation rate and GDP, it's already over 2%. So they should begin to move, and maybe 50 basis points, and then gradually, so that by this year they're becoming normal, because they don't want to be behind the curve. The danger is you get behind the curve, and everybody thinks inflation's too high, and then there's a potential for going too far, and then that's not what we want to have. We want to move into a good growing economy with an inflation rate that's close to 2%, which is the Fed's target, and not to cause any disruption. So I think that if they do that sooner, that rather than later, it will be a smoother operation.
미국이나 한국의 자산 시장이 크게 올랐습니다. 교수님께서는 여기에 어떤 붕괴될 버블이 있다고 보시는지, 또 투자자로서 좀 주의해야 할 부분이 있을까요?
I don't think they will burst if the policy is sensible in getting back to normal. The markets really don't like surprises, and that's another reason to start moving sooner rather than later so that a big surprise doesn't happen. But I think that if you're looking at what the economies are doing and their recovery is faster than the Fed thought, right? And then the inflation rate is picking up, and there's more talk about that. I think a move back towards a more normal policy. And after all, normal policies have worked well in the past, where whether it's the Taylor rule, whatever you call it, there's a methodology. And I think the sooner central banks get to that, the better.
유럽이나 아시아 등 이 세계 각국 중앙은행들이 통화 정책을 완화해서 긴축으로 전환하고 있습니다. 현 세계 중앙은행들의 통화 정책에 대한 평가도 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
It's a concern. It's always been a concern that central banks, of course, they look at each other, they follow each other. I know the ECB has now they have an inflation rate of 2% rather than almost 2%, but they very, very explicitly not gone to this average inflation targeting that the Fed has. The president, Christine Lagarde, has been very explicit about that. So I think that's probably the right thing to do. They have their own policy, and I think other central banks would as well. I do think that there is a concern about a tantrum if we go too far, and because they're linked together. And people are saying, the Fed has moved, you should move. But I think what is interesting now, and this is true of Europe and of Asia, there seems to be looking at each situation. And let's face it, countries are in different situations.
이번에는 한국에 대해서 좀 물어보도록 하겠습니다. 한국의 기준금리는 현재 0.50%입니다. 코로나로 인해서 이제 경제 위기가 심할 것으로 보고 이 금리를 내렸는데 한국의 적정 금리는 어느 정도라고 보시나요?
Well, I think that the Bank of Korea could be thinking about moving rates up too. I know there's lots of questions throughout Asia, and perhaps South Korea has been in a better situation. But it seems to me, 50 basis points, it means it's going to have to increase to some extent already. And so I would say get on with it. The markets are important, and the governor knows about that. and my general feeling here is let's try to get back to normal. That is a higher interest rate to be sure, and I think that's the best thing to do now.
향후 글로벌 경제의 가장 큰 리스크는 어떤 것이라 보시나요?
Perhaps the most important thing is regulation.
Right.
It seems like it's far from the current discussion, but there's a lot of talk about re-regulating firms, and there's concerns of international concerns. There's concern about the high-tech firms, Google, and you have Facebook, and you have Twitter, Apple, and there's a large amount of criticism of the firms. Sometimes it's because they don't allow enough freedom of speech. Sometimes it's because they restrict output too much. But the evidence is really still quite vague and informal. But there's a real effort to try to re-regulate them, to even break them up. And this is true of firms around the world. And so I think that would be the thing that you need to be careful of. On taxes, I'm of the view that we don't really need a big higher tax system. We're financing a tax system. I think the reduction in the marginal rates in the U.S. in recent years was good, so I'd hate to go back on that too much. It could be that it would make things worse rather than better.
Thank you for being with us today, and I hope all is well.
Thank you.